Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Agent Power Huddle for Thursday, October 24th. It is Scripting Thursday, and we are going to be talking about sellers. We're continuing our series on sellers. As you probably recall, we've covered how to prepare for a listing presentation, how to give a listing presentation. I've even shared my listing slide deck, which any of you are welcome to R&D, rip off and deploy. We also went through how to get sellers to price reasonably. So today we're going to talk about what if they are unreasonable. We all have had, and if not, you're going to have a seller who's unrealistic, right? And there's a number of different dialogues that you can use, sort of dependent on where you are in the process. So we're just going to cover a bunch of those. And as we do every week, at the end, I'll leave a little bit of time in case there's some specific scenarios that you guys are wondering what I would say in those scenarios. I always want to make myself available for those. So good morning to you as well, Rima. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And let's dive in, shall we? All right. I always forget I have two screens, so I need to unplug one. All right. So welcome to Scripting Thursday. If it looks like most of the folks that are on this call have been here before, so you know enough about me. I'm kind of bored with me. So what we're going to talk about today, as I mentioned, is overpriced listings or sellers that have too high an opinion of their value. And, you know, they aren't always going to heed your advice, right? You know, I went through our color picture CMA tour process last week, which is super effective, but it's not 100%. So in the end, you still may have a seller that says, I don't care, I want $1 million, right? Sellers are funny. They have sort of this, it's a matter of principle, right? So what can you do when you have a seller that's in that mindset? Well, it kind of depends, right? If they're too high, you could just go ahead and accept the listing, right? And we're going to talk about, you know, maybe you should think about some tolerances in those scenarios. You know, there's listings that I will take that are higher than my opinion, but they have to be within a certain range, and there's some other conditions that have to happen. So I'll walk you through what those are. Or you can punt, right? And you can simply say, you know what? I'm probably not the right broker for you. And you watch what happens when you say those words. You know, the consumer, the seller, will react either viscerally, demanding an explanation, or accepting. They'll say, yeah, you're probably right, right? Because in their mind, their home's really worth whatever number it is they're hung up on. And you and I both know that the market does not care what they think their home is worth, right? The market is what decides what their home is worth. And those are words that you can use with people depending on how the conversation is going, right? So if I'm accepting a listing that's higher than my CMA, I want to inoculate them to what's probably going to happen, right? And what's probably going to happen is a lack of traffic, a lack of offers, right? But I don't want to do it in a discouraging way, right? I don't want to make that. Here's the problem. If I'm too impassioned about, you know, driving home the point that they're too high, what are they going to conclude about me? He's not going to try very hard. He doesn't believe my house is worth it, right? But I still need to inoculate them to what could happen. We are going to pursue success like you wouldn't believe. But if the market gives us feedback, we have to listen, right? So I hope we get it, but in case we don't, we should have a plan B. Well, what do you think plan B is when you list a house higher than it's actually worth? do a price reduction, right? So I will get their pre-approval to reduce the price if it doesn't sell, right? So that's what inoculate really means. It means, hey, I'm with you, man. You think we might be able to get this number? Let's go for it. But if it doesn't work, we need to adjust, right? I actually don't say the word price reduction or reduce. I say we need to adjust. And they know what I mean, right? But it's not as scary or negative or depressing, right? And I'll point out to them the grave mistake of being too high at the beginning. Because if we are too high for the entire first 2 weeks, we've just blown all the traffic. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can look at you guys. I will actually draw for them. You know, if I'm sitting in your living room, I'll pull out a piece of paper and I'll draw a line that is a bump, and then it goes slowly flat and level, right? And then I draw a vertical line and I say that bump is the first 2 weeks. So it's easier to imagine if you're writing it down or if I'm doing it on a piece of paper, but you're basically drawing a line that then tapers out and you say, those are the first 2 weeks. Well, if we're too high for the entire first 2 weeks, you just screwed yourself, right? And we don't want to do that. So what am I going to inoculate them to? I'm going to inoculate them to doing a price reduction after 1 week, right? So I say, you know, the highest volume of traffic comes in the first 2 weeks, and we don't want to waste all of that time being priced too high. So what we should do is evaluate the traffic and consider an adjustment after 1 week. Because then at least out of those first 2 weeks, I'm telling you guys, I'm not saying this to the seller, but just so you can visualize it in your mind, at least for half of those 2 weeks, we're going to be priced appropriately, right? And I should tell you, I'm talking about 2% or 3% too high. If they're 10% too high, that's when I say I'm not the broker for you. Does that make sense? So that's what I mean when I say you have to have a tolerance of how high would you be willing to accept and still list it for them, but only under these conditions where they've already agreed to adjust it after 7 days, right? And if they won't, I'm right back to I'm not the broker for you, right? Now, if we get low or no traffic in week 1, would you be willing to reduce it before week 2, right? And you can have that dialogue or use that in a conversation before it gets on the market, right? That's how you preemptively get a price reduction lined up. Or you could do it when you're 2 or 3 days on the market, 4 days on the market, and it's been crickets. You got to listen, right? You got to listen to the market. And I always say, hey, seller, the market is giving us feedback. And the feedback is that we are priced too high, right? If you don't get showings, you're priced too high, plain and simple. And the other visual that I'll use with sellers is, hey, you know what? Buyers have the MLS in their pocket now, right? Because they do. They all have Redfin and Zillow and your site and my site. They're all IDX fed. So they can see all the activity and all the listings. So buyers are savvy, right? So you want to preemptively discuss how much would that reduction be. Now, if you're doing this before you've listed and you're sort of haggling over whether you should come on the market too high or not, you've already told them what you think the right number is, right? So that is the reduction you're aiming for. You know, if it's worth 900 and they want to list for 925 just to see, then do that for 7 days. If it sells, I will celebrate with you. But if we get little to no traffic, that's telling us we're priced too high and we need to adjust quickly, right? Implement that price reduction on a Thursday. I've already mentioned in previous meetings why Thursday is when we always take our listings live. It also is the day that we do all of our price reductions, and it's for the same reason, right? And I'll cover it briefly here in case you're new. Thursday is the day to put homes on the market because buyers agents are setting up their showing schedules for the weekend, usually on Friday, but often on Thursday as well, in case they're showing properties that could be tenant occupied, right? Because those require 24 hours notice. So by listing it late in the day on Thursday, we're going to be near the top of the hot sheets when they start looking for listings they want to show, right? So that logic resonates with sellers, and that gives you the ability to draw a line in the sand for the cleanup or the staging or the painting or whatever they're doing. We're aiming for Thursday. That means I got to get my photographer in there on Wednesday. That means you need to be done by Tuesday or whatever it is, right? Well, for price reductions, it works the same way because all of those buyer's agents have set up searches in the MLS, and when you reduce your price, your listing will pop into one of their searches because you were slightly too high and now you're in their wheelhouse. And for that same reason, you want that to happen on Thursday so that they can schedule their showings and come and show your property, right? By the way, you should also do open houses following price reductions anyway, right? All right. If they're really too high, I already talked about how we're going to say, you know what, I'm probably not the right broker for you, right? Another softer way to do it is, I'd rather disappoint you today than disappoint you 30 days from now. That's a really elegant way to tell somebody that it's just not going to sell for what they're hoping. Another version, which I didn't put in this slide, is, you know what, why not stay? I love that one because why not stay forces them to think hard about their why, right? Everybody that lists their home for sale has an emotional why. And I am pressing on that nerve hard when I say, why not stay? And they go, well, we really want to get down to Florida to see our grandson or our granddaughter or whatever, right? Well, then we need to be realistic, right? So you can use the why not stay to inoculate them to a series of price reductions if they're really too high, right? So let's talk about how to get a price reduction because there really is a technique to it, and it involves some time. So you really want to two-step it. So what do I mean by two-step? I mean, you're going to inoculate them before you ask for the price reduction. You're going to say things like, I'm not saying we need to reduce the price today, but if we don't see a change or we don't get an offer in the next week, we're going to need to do one next week, right? And then I tell them, there's a saying in real estate, or I'll call it an axiom. There's an axiom in real estate. 30 days on the market or 20 showings with no offers means we're overpriced. And I always say we, right? Because I want them to feel like we are a team. I never say you're overpriced, right? 30 days on the market or 20 showings with no offers equals we are overpriced. Say it with conviction, say it like it's a fact, right? Because you and I both know it is a fact. If you're not getting traffic and you don't have any offers or you've had 20 people go through and none of them wrote, that means they think you're overpriced based on the condition, right? So here's how you inoculate them. The first step is, let's not panic. Let's see what this weekend brings us. And if it doesn't sell, next Thursday, we will be 28 days on the market or whatever it is, right? And it'll be time for a reduction. So I'm usually having this conversation around week 3. because that ties into the 30 days or 20 showings time frame, right? So let's not panic, but let's see what happens this weekend. And if we don't get an offer this weekend, then next week on Thursday, we're going to want to consider an adjustment. Because at that point, we will be 30 days or 28 days or whatever it is. Right? The reason we do a two-step is because those words are disappointing, right? And they're human. And they need time to grieve. They need time to get through the 5 stages of grief and get to the 5th stage, which you all know is acceptance, right? So you've just given them bad news, right? They know it. They're aware that they haven't gotten an offer, but now you're talking about a price reduction. Oh man, this is not what the plan was, right? So you got to inoculate them so that they have those next 7 days, or really like 5 days, because what I'll do is I'll have this conversation on a Friday. By the way, I call all my sellers on Friday. That's when I give them the debrief on traffic and everything that's been happening, impressions online, everything. And that would be where I would say, you know what? We're now at 21 days on the market. We still don't have any offers, or we've had 20 showings and we still don't have any offers. There is this axiom in real estate, and I tell them 30 days on the market or 20 showings. And then I'm not saying we're going to price reduce today, but we should be ready to do it next week if it doesn't sell this weekend. And then you got to shut up and listen, right? Because if they're angry, they'll tell you. If they're depressed or sad, they'll tell you. You might want to say, you know what? I'll hold it open this weekend. I wasn't planning to, but let's really try hard to get something this weekend so that we don't have to do a price reduction. You and I both know that holding it open isn't really going to sell it, right? 99% of open houses do not result in the sale of that house. But the seller doesn't realize that. So it's encouraging to them to feel like you're hustling, right? Then on Monday or Tuesday, let them know what the traffic was over the weekend and start discussing the price reduction. You can tell them, hey, we're not going to do it till Thursday, but the open houses were a fail, and we haven't had any offers, and we didn't have any showings over the weekend either. So it's time to make an adjustment. We usually do our adjustments on Thursday. So let's start talking about what we're going to implement on Thursday. And they'll go, yeah, I kind of figured, right? And the best part about this two-step approach is when you talk to them on Monday, they're going to already have a number in mind. Because all weekend they were thinking, well, if I have to price reduce, how much? 25 grand or what, right? And they'll start noodling on it. They'll start thinking about it. Then once you get an agreement to do the price reduction, before you do the price reduction, call every showing agent. And if your MLS system, we're on Matrix here in Washington. If you guys have Matrix or something like that, and there's a reverse prospecting tool, use that as well. Send an email to anybody in the reverse prospecting. That means anybody that sent the listing to one of their clients. We have a way of seeing that. So I send them an email, hey, we're going to be implementing a price reduction. Consider writing an offer before the rest of the world knows about it, right? That's a motivator for a buyer who liked it, but just thought it was too expensive, right? So you can say, so here's what I never finished my thought, sorry. Email the reverse prospecting list, right? So that's going to be 70 to 100 agents that forwarded your listing somewhere. And then call anybody that actually had a physical showing. Call them, have the conversation. Hey, I wanted to give you a heads up that we are getting ready to do a price reduction. And I wanted to let you know before we did it and told the rest of the world about it. Because what the buyer's agent should hear, and you can say this to them, So you know what, man? We're going to go down by 25 grand. You could write an offer today that's 40 grand under asking, and my client will already be inclined to consider it rather than be offended, right? Because they can take the anticipated reduction and add to it if their client feels like your price reduction isn't quite enough. But that's okay, right? Because if you did the bigger price reduction, they would have competition. So you're giving them an advantage by giving them the heads up before you implement. Someone else is going to write an offer, right? All right. I'm going to get out of here, get back over to here so I can see you guys. Does that all make sense? Do you see how giving them, thank you, Herb, drive safely and say hi to your dog. Do you see how inoculating your seller to a price reduction before they have to implement it will make it easier for them to say yes to it? Give them time to grieve, right? All right. Any questions on that or any other scenarios that you guys are finding yourselves in that you would like to know what Ed would say in those situations?
No, I love it, Ed.
Hey, Herb.
Yeah, I love hearing your perspective on this. I share a lot of the same sentiments. And I love that set them up for the expectation. I don't think I necessarily do it in that two-step approach, so I'm going to keep that in mind. I do remember having a listing where the seller said, well, it's February and I don't really need the move until like June, but we want to put it on the market. So we want to start high.
Yeah.
And, eventually what happened is, we did have showings and stuff on it. And then eventually it just like, they didn't even want to hear my staging remarks about painting certain walls because they had some funky colors on it. Yeah. And the listing expired, and then they went with somebody else who got them to actually move out and move, and then the home was vacant, and then they were able to do the painting and move furniture around the right way. But so I learned
that always the way, isn't that always what happens, where they fight you like hell, and then they give the next guy who didn't do anything to earn it a huge price reduction because they want to get it sold,
Yeah.
Right. And I'll answer your question, but I'll point out in those scenarios, I will say, hey, Joe and Mary, I know what you're going to do. You're going to get out of my agreement, and you're going to hire somebody else, and you're going to give them the price reduction that I've been telling you we need all along. Why don't you just give the price reduction to me and let's get this thing sold? Right? And does that always work? Of course not. Some people just need a change of scenery, and that includes you, right? So don't take it personally. We all get fired at some point, but go down fighting, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, hey man, I know what you're going to do. I've seen it happen a million times. You're going to give the next person a price reduction. Let's just implement it now. You don't have to worry about all the time it's going to take to replace me and hire somebody new and enter a new agreement with a 6-month term and all this stuff. Let's just implement the price reduction and get this thing sold now. And, 20 or 30% of the time I say that, they do it. And I get it, and we sell it. So that's a really powerful dialogue. I want to go back to Herb's comment or question about we got plenty of time, so let's start high, right? That is, and you guys have heard me say this in this meeting before, the most unsophisticated negotiating tactic on the planet is to do exactly what Herb just described, and he's not alone, right? We all have people that do that. We have, Herb, I don't know if you were on this call when I went through my slide deck, but I'm going to show you one slide in it that speaks directly to that issue so that you can see that when that comes up, it's usually after they've decided to hire me, and now we're talking about pricing. And I can say, do you remember on my presentation that one slide that said, so let me show you what it says, and then I'll finish what I would say. I got too many things opened. Can you guys all see this triangle? So if you look at this, and this is what I say during the listing presentation, I go, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this slide is to show you that there's really no benefit to doing a fishing expedition on price, because what this is telling us is the visibility based on a function of the price. So you see, as you increase the price, the visibility goes down, which makes the time on market go up. So a lower priced home sells faster than a higher priced home, right? But I really want to draw your attention to even just going up 10%, because look what happens to the visibility. It drops from 60 to 30, and you have cut the number of eyeballs that see your home in half. So that is a huge mistake. Just to go on a fishing expedition, or just to make it so that we don't have to move until June or whatever, that's a grave mistake. Let's not make that mistake. I actually had one of these exactly, Herb, 2 years ago. It was a $4 million listing, and we went on the market in March of 2022 with the understanding that they did not want to move until July 31st. So 4 months, right? And with occupancy affidavits for any finance buyer, they would have to move in within 60 days. So then we had this conversation, because they're like, well, we know we aren't going to move sooner than July 31st because our son's graduating. We're hosting a graduation party in July and blah, blah, blah. These are the reasons why. And I said, well, if you guys remember, March of 22 was still a very white hot market. And so I said, well, we can market your home priced appropriately, not priced high just to force it to take longer, but priced appropriately, but then ask for an extended closing. And we were in the type of market where we could get that, right? So sure enough, it sold before the review date. We got an offer $250,000 over asking. We got a $250,000 earnest money released to the seller immediately. I mean, it was aggressive and awesome and perfect. Plus, didn't close until May 31st, possession date July 31st. So it set up perfectly. The bummer, you guys all remember May 22nd, right? Interest rates, May 21st of 2022, went up 200 basis points. And that buyer terminated 4 days before the closing date on May 27th, which is also, by the way, a 3-day weekend, Memorial Day weekend. So my point is this: I made sure that we priced it appropriately, not priced it high so that we could take longer to sell. The other dialogue that you can use, Herb, in those situations is, and it's kind of visual, so I'll try and do it on the camera, but basically I say there's this phenomenon where if you start too high, it's going to sell lower than it would have had you started more reasonably. And the reason is, if you start too high and you start getting offers down here, you're going to then do a price reduction, and then you're going to get offers down here, and you're in this race to the bottom. And I do this thing with my hands so that I can say, it's only once you do a big enough price reduction to intersect where those offers are coming in that you're going to trigger a sale. And that's going to be extraordinarily lower than it would have been if we would have priced appropriately. And people, they may never have thought of it that way, but they can visualize it and they can understand and appreciate it, right?
Yeah, I think the part with your hands where the offers coming in gets lower and lower, I think that's a great visual. And in that example that I gave you, I think they really didn't want to move until further on down the line. My comeback, if I had to do it over again, I'd say, well, then let's not list it now.
Amen, man. That's a little bit of the version of, why not stay, right? Because you're right.
Right.
I would rather have somebody who doesn't really want to move till the middle of next year, but starts talking about it now, because I'm in a position to differentiate myself months ahead of when they're starting to truly interview agents and get serious about it. And I can influence the plan and the outcome too. So those folks don't bother me, but you just have to be confident enough to give them guidance that, they're going to heed. And a lot of times our competition doesn't, right? Our competition are just a bunch of yes men and women, and they just say, okie dokie. And that makes your job harder. Fair, plain and simple. So be confident, be strong in what you say and convicted, and you will win more often than you lose, right? Now, Rima, you put something in the chat. I was going to ask you about dealing with someone who wants to terminate the contract just as we are talking about a price reduction. Oh, so that was the one. Yeah.
From the summer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he listed with a new agent, and they are much lower than we were even going to go. And it's still sitting. It's been 3 weeks. And he's listed.
Yeah. I think in that case, I know Rima's situation and that client better than I would for more of you or most of you. And that was a win for you to extract yourself from that.
Yes, so. It was. And I think it has something to do with the building too, because there's another unit that's been on the market just as long and it's not moving either.
Yep. And Suma, you nailed it. When you overprice listings, the neighbors watch, right? And they're going to be like, oh gosh, that took a long time to sell or didn't sell or whatever. So, nothing good comes from taking an overpriced listing. And that's really the kind of the main message of today is have a tolerance about how much above your value you're willing to work on, but preemptively get them to consider a price reduction before it even goes on the market. And if you have a squirrely seller, I've done this before too, I'll get it in writing. I'll have them sign it. Before it's even gone live, I've got a signed price reduction that's going to be implemented, right? Brittany said, I have a client that wanted to cancel because we sat on the market for a while. They want to sell next year. Would you say to retain that business? Yeah. I would always think the opportunity to sell a listing is a good one, unless, like Rima's was toxic. So that's why I made that comment about her being better off without that deal. But in most cases, consumers aren't really normally toxic. They're just naive or ignorant about the market. I don't mean dumb. I just mean ignorant of information, right? And it's your job to educate them. So if they're willing to listen to you, Brittany, then you should absolutely keep them. Oh, I see. You're asking, what would I say, right? So I would say, okay, well, we tried and we were unsuccessful. What did we learn? So give them a full debrief on the history going backwards from the day you went on the market, right? So we had this many showings. The feedback was X, Y, and Z. Hopefully you've been keeping them updated weekly about the feedback as you've gone along. And now you can preemptively say, you know what, why don't we take it off the market for the holidays? That'll allow you to enjoy your holidays. And then let's put it back on the market in January. And I have a whole dialogue. We'll cover this next week or 2 weeks. I think next week, because I'm going to be in Miami, they're going to do a recording. But in 2 weeks, we will cover the January dialogue, how to get somebody to look forward to listing in January because it's prudent. All right. So I just canceled and got documents saying they will relist with me. They will rent for 6 months and then back on the market. Yeah. Yeah. So Suma hit the nail on the head, right? You want to get all of this in writing. So if they're going to relist, make sure you have that signed. Also put in the canceled listing, put in the remarks, do not contact this seller. They are already under contract to relist so that they don't get a bunch of phone calls from expired and canceled brokers, right? All right. This was a good one. I appreciate all you guys hanging out with me. I will, Brittany, you came off mute. Were you going to ask something before I let everybody go?
No, I was saying thank you. Sorry, I'm working at this now.
Oh, no worries. I hope everything works out. You'll have to let us know how it goes. And the rest of you have an awesome rest of your day.
If you'd like more information or to get connected to the Agent Power Huddle, join our free Facebook group. This call was designed for the agents in our EXP organization, but open to any agent from any brokerage. If you're a guest and you're interested in learning more about EXP or our specific resources within the Agent Collective, reach out to the person who invited you to this call to get more info. Produced by the Agent Collective Media Network.